Welcome on into the Fantasy Football Forge. My name is Steve, and it is time to finish up this little mini-series looking at drafting from the late portion of the draft in this video, picks 9 through 12. I've already looked at picking from picks 1 through 4, 5 through 8, and now 9 through 12 for 12-team leagues. I'm also, in each video, had a section where I look at 10-team leagues, so picks 1 through 3, 4 through 7, and 8 through 10 in this video. We're going to be looking at several different mock drafts that I've done from these positions, looking at different strategies. So I've been looking at zigging while the rest of the field zags, going with the flow. So drafting typically what's taken, in the later rounds when you're up on the clock. Hero RB, zero RB, and heavy RB. So taking like 2 out of the first 3 rounds running back, basically. We will keep in mind 2 wide receiver versus 3 wide receiver. Generally speaking, I just made it simple on myself, and when I'm picking a favorite roster, I'm kind of leaning towards just having to fill out a 2 wide receiver with a little bit of a nod to the potential of it being 3 wide receiver, but it'll be, I think, pretty obvious a lot of times when there's a roster where like, oh, that's a risky 3 wide receiver roster, or oh, that's a good 3 wide receiver roster. And I invite you to disagree with any of the choices that I make when I pick a favorite roster. Most of the time, it's a pretty darn tough decision. It's pretty close. A few times it's very obvious, and I'll try to point that out either way when it's obvious or not. A couple of quick announcements here. We're going to hop on up to my website, www.theFFforge.com. Link down in the description. Let's go up to my beautiful homepage. I made this website myself, which is why it is so beautiful. You don't even need to let me know in the comments how great it is. I know. So this is the website when you go to it, and you can just scroll right down on the first page, and you get yourself access to this printable draft sheet, which I'll show you in just a second. But I also want to show you that you go up top, you click on the rankings, and you can get all my individual position rankings, including DST rankings and my overall rankings. That gets a little updated a little less often, whereas wide receiver, running back, quarterback, tight end, it's been almost every day now that I'll be doing little tweaks here and there with all the training camp news, now we've got the preseason games coming through. But most importantly, I have this, which will be updated about once a week as well. Going into each weekend, I will be updating this, and this is, my rankings, but it's only half my rankings. It's actually an average of my rankings and the ADP to help you be able to draft a little bit better. But if you like my rankings, it just kind of keeps that in mind, and I will always suggest 2 things. One of them is if you're in a league where the manager brings a cheat sheet, and at least 10 of the people, like a lot of the people in the league, just use that sheet that your league manager brings in, I definitely recommend having that as well, and maybe combining that and printing off. You can print off too my individual position rankings. If you're interested in becoming a member of the channel, check out my player highlights videos, specifically the David Njoku and the James Cook videos at the last few minutes of them. There is some more detailed information about what you can expect by becoming a member of the channel, helping me out. It's obviously very, very much appreciated, not too expensive, and there are a few perks that you can get along with that. So go check that out if you'd like to see more. And of course, every Thursday night, if you're not aware, we are drafting live here on the channel, and you're able to get involved as well. We're using the Sleeper app. We've got a small group of people who've been coming each and every week. Hopefully, that will grow, and along with that, so that's every Thursday night live, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we do like 2 mock drafts. I also cover all of the week's news from training camp and now like preseason, if there's any injuries in that or anything like that, or just interesting camp battles that maybe we weren't expecting somebody to be the leader in, etc. And the week leading up to the Labor Day holiday weekend, where most people are going to be doing their drafts, the majority of people do their drafts that weekend, I will be hosting live mock drafting throughout the entirety of the week, hopefully every single night. So keep that in mind and come join us, and we'll get you prepped up, get some practice reps for your actual draft. The last thing, and you can get access, this is up on the website as well under analysis, so you would see it here. The hotspots, maps, and these helped me with is somewhat just looking at the general flow of the draft when drafting from picks 9 through 12 for 12-team leagues. And more specifically, it really helps me to come up with going with the flow drafts to see what typically gets taken, what position typically goes in these picks for each round of the draft. But this is via ADP. As you can see, like round 5, there are no ADPs landed in there because it is an average draft position. Averages can be funny like that. So I also have this via ranking chart where there's the next 4 players count and what positions they were are tallied for each round. So there's none of that. So this is a more specific look at what positions are going, but it's a very specific look, and as we know, the ADPs are averages for a reason because some players get taken a whole round plus or minus from their ADP as you get later into the draft. So that's where I like to have this look at it as well. Either way, I use these charts. You can look at them closer if you would like. I think there's a lot of good information to take from them, but also I've saturated that information down, concentrated it into 2 very specific draft formulas that I'm going to abide by when going zigging while the rest of the field zags, while going with the flow, going with the field. And I will, when we put those drafts up, I will show you what order that ended up being. And it's almost that time, so let's just real quick looking at some general notes that I took about drafting late here. Some of this information ends up getting resolved throughout the video. Some of it's from before, some of it's after doing the drafting. So let's just go through it. Generally speaking, I don't like drafting late in this year's draft, which is not normal for me. Usually I like maybe not quite at the end of the draft being the best spot, but usually I'm pretty comfortable drafting late. I don't mind it, and I would love to be at pick 7 or something like that a lot of the time. But this year, I really do think, once again, being in that middle's great, but I really am finding it tough to draft teams that I fall in love with later in the draft. I wish I had an earlier pick than my pick in my home league. And so one of the conclusions that I came up to was that if you're drafting from this area of the draft and you're in the same zone as me, and I know one of my buddies was too. He texted me one day saying that he just wasn't liking his teams late, and I think the main piece of advice is that if you're not liking your drafts, then you need to be willing to just go with your gut and reach from these positions. You have to be a little less reliant, at least for me and the guys that I like, on them possibly falling to you, because a lot of times they're just falling short for me and not quite making it to me when I'm hoping that they will. So I will show you a couple of drafts where I did this for 12-team leagues at the end of the 12-team section. And that would not be an accurate statement for 10-team leagues in general here. This is a lot of 12-team stuff for the general. The 10-team leagues, I don't mind drafting from late at all. It's perfectly fine. The issue resolves itself by just taking those couple of picks off. My third, generally speaking, note here is the main reason behind my issues when drafting late. I kind of narrowed it down, figured out what the flow of the draft, what's creating these issues for me. And that was that there is a really good and large group of wide receivers that goes off the board in such a way that from the 2nd and 3rd round picks at that turn through the turn of the 7th and 8th round turn, that you're either picking up scraps and hoping that they are scraps that you personally like, or you're reaching according to ADP to avoid from picking through the scraps the next time that you're up on the board. I'm trying to find a way to work around this, and so what I came up with was what I told you that we will see shortly. Kind of same idea here is going wide receiver, running back plus wide receiver, running back, or wide receiver plus wide receiver, running back in the first 4 rounds. Just trying to make sure to force the wide receiver issue early on, and at a minimum get 2, but more likely get 3 out of my first 4 picks wide receivers is, I think, a workaround for this issue. Although, so if you go wide receiver, maybe this is something you want to do anyways, but I just find that a little bit hard to imagine for most people. So this is the group of wide receivers that you go around the turn from this late position. It's Puka Nacua, Garrett Wilson, Marvin Harrison Jr., Drake London, Devontae Adams. And for me, I put Chris Olave in that group as well because he's my second highest, actually, out of all those players ranked. But I know that's not common. Meanwhile, if you're going to pick two of those out in the first, around that first, second turn there, that also means that you're going to be almost certainly giving up on a Jahmyr Gibbs, a Jonathan Taylor, Saquon Barkley, which for me, like Garrett Wilson and one of those guys, even over Chris Olave and over everybody else, it just makes more sense. I have more trust in Gibbs, a little bit questionable, but the upside is too good, and the Jonathan Taylor, Saquon Barkley, than I do any of those wide receivers. There's question marks all over those wide receivers. That's the issue, is you're going to be giving up on something that's better for your team at that point in the draft. But does the whole makeup of your team at the end of the day end up looking better if you do go wide receiver early? That's something that you can determine, but I will help to show you enough examples that you can kind of come to that determination and then try it out on your own and see if you agree or not when you're doing your drafting. For the running back position, just looking at one quick note that I had on each of these positions when drafting from late, I think that you have to give serious consideration. This is going to go opposite to what I talk about for wide receivers and what I just talked about to going running back. And I do think that you should practice going running back for at least one mock draft or two, just to see how you feel about it, because you can get, Jahmyr Gibbs or Jonathan Taylor and Saquon Barkley right around that turn. Sometimes a running back, Breece Hall, might fall to you there at like pick 8, and then maybe you can get Saquon Barkley around that turn. And that's absolutely a studly running back duo that you can start off with. Very exciting. And then you pick up your wide receivers, and like I said, then you just might be feeling like you're reaching for your specific wide receiver targets. But it's a strategy to keep in mind, one that I do not mind, despite ultimately maybe siding with going for those wide receivers a little bit earlier in this draft. But how the board works for drafting late really suggests going running back often enough. Not every single time, depends exactly who's there, exactly where you're drafting from there. But let's look at the tight ends. If you have some sleeper options that you like later on in the draft, I'm talking like late in the draft, true sleeper options that you're comfortable taking a shot on, I do like doing that to an extent here later on in the draft, even though I in this draft, technically, I prefer getting one of those top tight ends. Oftentimes, when drafting late, it just felt like I was having to reach for a tight end through the first few tiers of tight ends, through the guys that I wish I would like to have on my team. I'm just seeing better value at other positions on the board when I would normally maybe take them from the middle position because that other value is gone, and now I feel comfortable taking them. So oftentimes I was just like the tight end position, it just never felt right. But if I have a couple of guys late that I feel comfortable with, then I can just go ahead and take them and feel okay about it. So the thing is, if you don't have those sleepers, see if you can't find a couple that you feel, watch a few videos about people with sleepers. I suggest Noah Fant, check out my tight ends video. I have a few there for you. And I'll cover a couple today. Then we're talking about the wide receiver position. Once you get to the Keenan Allen / Christian Kirk type of group, all the way through the Rashee Rice / Ladd McConkey type of tier of wide receivers, you will be lucky to get two guys that you also like a lot throughout those tiers. That's going to be your 5th through your 8th round draft picks for drafting late here. There's a small group, the Deontay Johnson, Hopkins, Brian Thomas Jr., Coleman, Watson, JSN, that you'll possibly be able to kind of reach into around that 7th, 8th turn if you're not comfortable with what you've gotten at wide receiver up to that point and you feel that you need to get, one last shot at them. There's especially like Hopkins, Deontay Johnson, there's a certain level of comfort, but there's a reason that these guys are all going late too. And there are big question marks surrounding them. No guarantees in that group. What I'm saying that is in the first 4 rounds, I think you want to feel good about your wide receivers, which might mean that you should reach for a wide receiver in the 2nd round, not going running back to avoid reaching for the 5th to 8th round tier of wide receiver later. So basically, it comes down to, are you going to reach early or are you going to reach late? That's what I was talking about before of like, I know it feels wrong to take one of those wide receivers over those running backs, but in the long haul, it might make sense to do that. It also depends on what you like. who you like, who you don't like. But this point about the wide receivers also goes doubly so for being in a 3 wide receiver league. Then I think you really got to be pushing to make sure that you feel comfortable with those wide receivers that you're getting earlier on in the draft. Once again, pushing, even if you got to reach a little bit. For the quarterback position, unfortunately, due to this wide receiver crunch that I keep bringing up, I think that you're giving up a lot to get a quarterback earlier on in the draft. But between the tight end position and the quarterback position, there is a spot around the 3-4 turn to get one of the top quarterbacks if you wish. The tight ends are also available there, but I really don't want to be spending 1, 2, 3, 4, that 3-4 turn on a quarterback and a tight end. And I think that the value of taking the quarterback there is a little bit better than taking the tight end there. You can get one around that turn. Otherwise, just like the tight ends, have a couple late that you would rather have. I will say Joe Burrow, if you're really comfortable with him, does seem to be a decent target for you. But if Anthony Richardson is your target, unfortunately, he doesn't normally make it around to your 5th round pick. It's a risk worth taking if you're picking from pick 8 and you want to take that risk. Maybe even pick 9, but you just should not expect him to still be there in the 5th round in that case. But you might be able to get like Lamar Jackson around that 3-4 turn instead. So that's kind of how that works out. We'll see that working out. Let's get on to these drafts, and we're going to start out looking at picking with the flow. As you can see, I did 2 drafts just so that we can pick the best one from this group. We're not going to spend a whole lot of time looking at these, but I'll leave them up there, give you a chance to just give a peek at them. Obviously, going with the flow, the order that I came to was going wide receiver, running back, wide receiver, quarterback, tight end, wide receiver, running back, wide receiver, running back, wide receiver, running back. And so you'll see, like, my advice on the tight ends was that if you didn't get one around that 3-4 turn, to push it. Whereas the consensus is to take a tight end there in the 5th round when you go with the flow. I find I don't have a problem with taking Kittle or Pitts here, especially after the injury to wide receiver there, their slot wide receiver. I think that should bring a couple more targets to Pitts per game this season. I don't mind it, but there's just, to me, like, I'm trying to get another wide receiver there or a running back there. Something else over these tight ends that I think is a little bit more valuable, especially if you're looking at a 3 wide receiver type league. I don't want to be doing that. 2 wide receiver, 2 running back, 1 flex. More understandable to me. I actually do have a note. So in early DST is normally taken from this area of the draft. So it is common that people are jumping on the DST when they're drafting from a later position here. So, at your heart's desire, there you go. That's what's normally happening. And same with the kickers. So kickers, DSTs, for whatever reason, ADP-wise, they were going around from this position the earliest. Second quarterback could have gone at any point from the 8th to the 11th round. So I didn't do a 2 quarterback. I know a lot of people feel more comfortable drafting 2 quarterbacks. So if you're one of those people, from the 8th to 11th round, within the flow, at any point in there, you just get whoever you're comfortable with. Works very nicely. The groups were there for me to have taken them here too. And a second tight end from the 12th round right to the end of the draft also worked within the flow. So those things, a general later end quarterback, tight end, just kind of naturally worked with the flow once again. So when drafting from pick 10, I wrote that I feel like normally there's a better running back left than Kyren Williams. You see that second time around, I got Jonathan Taylor there, who I do think is a slightly significantly better than Kyren Williams. It's close in some ways, but also there's just some concern with Blake Corum for Kyren Williams. And once again, I take Lamar over Patrick Mahomes. So once again, because you will see this a lot. So just assume whenever I'm taking a quarterback here with this 4th round pick, Lamar Jackson's probably available, and I would take him over whichever quarterback I've taken there, Patrick Mahomes or something. Patrick Mahomes is actually the lowest on my list out of those. I have him right behind Anthony Richardson. Another thing from pick 12, I have J.K. Dobbins ranked higher than Gus Edwards. So there was something with that Gus Edwards pick. I would rather have J.K. Dobbins over him anyways. So just something to keep in mind for me mentally when rating this team. Like, J.K. Dobbins was available there, so I could have gone Chase Brown, J.K. Dobbins, or even gotten a better wide receiver and then J.K. Dobbins there. Now we're looking at from picks 9 and 11 going the zig, while the rest of the board zags. You can see slight opposites going quarterback, tight end, just a little bit earlier, and then a lot of differences. It looks pick 10 looks like either way we got running back there, but otherwise, and pick 12 wide receiver in both cases. It just kind of happens to work out like that. This is somewhat subjective how I created these. Couple of notes for drafting from the zigzag method here. There really was not a clear round to zig at tight end, but what I did realize was that the real zig was drafting a tight end from the top 4 rounds of the draft prior to round 5 was the main thing when I was looking at those charts that I showed you earlier up on my website, the hotspots charts. That really stood out, because otherwise tight end you could kind of like take at any point in the draft. And it wouldn't have been like going with the flow or zigzag too much either way. So that's what I did. I made the tight end there in the 4th round as my zig, and I kept round 8 as an open running back / quarterback option. It depends how you feel and if you think it's worth protecting your highly taken quarterback with another higher end option, or just hoping that they stay healthy, which in the case of Patrick Mahomes, I think you could do. But if you get any of those running quarterbacks that I like more than Patrick Mahomes up there, probably worth backing up your quarterback. So that's one of the advantages to taking a Patrick Mahomes. The health-wise, I think it's a little bit more reliable than dual-threat quarterbacks. So a couple of notes that I had when picking from the zig-zag option here was from pick 9, I just moved Breece Hall ahead of Bijan Robinson for a slight fear of comments given by his head coach, that being Bijan Robinson, head coach, about his usage, with Tyler Algier apparently being a big part of their game plan. I also wrote that I would take Chris Olave over Devontae Adams there, looking at pick 9. I'd take Lamar Jackson over Patrick Mahomes. I'd take Zamir White over DeAndre Swift. I'd take Chase Brown over Tyjae Spears. I have other targets I'd rather take than Ricky Pearsall with that last pick. So just some personal differences that I would have made there from pick 9. And for pick 11, I wrote basically the same thing that I said for pick 9, because they were very similar. I'm not going to go and compare each pick to one another. They're quite similar, but at the end of the day, I did like pick 9 here just a little bit more. And so that we're going to face that up against going with the flow. Pick 12 there with the flow. Pick 9 here for zigzag method. And they both start off strong, thinking Breece Hall or Garrett Wilson, 1st round, fine there. Adams, Jonathan Taylor. I'm going to give the early lead to pick 12 going with the flow. And then you got by going quarterback tight end there, I give up a little bit at wide receiver like they talk about. So what's this wide receiver room difference look like? Jalen Waddle, not a definite, but a slight lead over Tank Dell. It's pretty close for being able to get, Tank Dell 2 rounds later. Keenan Allen, Rashee Rice. I like the floor for Keenan. I don't know. I like the floor for Rashee Rice too. I have Keenan Allen ranked higher. This is just a gut feeling that Rashee Rice might be just as good as Keenan Allen, better, close to something like that. I think is very possible. I get Rashee Rice over at pick 12 as well, though. So definite advantage for the top 4 wide receivers for pick 12. No advantage for quarterback for pick 9. I would say a definite advantage at tight end, but the wide receiver advantage works out better. So really it comes down to the running backs. Bijan a little bit better. Swift over Mostert. Well, that could have been Zamir White, but still, it's pretty close. It's really close. I actually don't know. What did I go? I went with the flow here, like that depth at running back. And this really, in part, comes down to just actually liking that roster more. So we want that one to move along, and that's going to move on into the competition going up against zero or hero running back. I should mention that I assigned the zero, hero, heavy running back draft positions randomly, but I think that the randomness ended up being befitting of where you're drafting specifically from this late position the most likely scenario that you'd want to go with each of these strategies. So it ended up being from pick 9. I got the 0 running back strategy. There's often one of those top wide receivers left over there, picks 8, 9. I guess in this case, 9, 10, 11, 12, so 9. that you can take advantage of if they do fall there. In this case, like Amon-Ra St. Brown. So that's nice. Even I think Garrett Wilson's fine if he's there, if you want to go. But oftentimes one of those guys will fall to you. So I thought that worked out nicely. And then hero running back from right around the turn, picks 11 and 12. Hero running back, heavy running back. I've talked about the running backs and how it naturally works really nicely around that turn to even get 2 running backs. Or in this case, hero running back. So let's start off by looking at the 0 running back roster there. Amon-Ra St. Brown, Marvin Harrison Jr., Jalen Waddle, Patrick Mahomes with pick 4. Aaron Jones, Zamir White, Austin Eckler, Trey Benson, J.K. Dobbins for the running backs. Went 2 tight ends here, Pat Freiermuth and then Noah Fant. So there's, I believe I mentioned him earlier as one of my sleepers. Noah Fant. This offensive scheme, Grubs, they should get the tight end involved a lot more than the previous regime was utilizing Noah Fant. So I'm expecting something from him this year and thinking that the ceiling's pretty good, but it's a total projection. We'll see. That's why he's a sleeper. And then for the follow-up wide receivers here, Chris Godwin, Khalil Shakir, solid, especially in like full PPR type leagues. Those are the types of guys that you might end up wanting. So that's nice. And you look at those first 3 guys, too, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Marvin Harrison, especially could be really good full PPR guys. So definitely like an advantage for full PPR. Then you include Aaron Jones, Austin Eckler. This is a good full PPR roster. Zamir White's the one that might just be, is not going to be anything special in terms of full PPR. So a couple of notes that I wrote for picking from pick 9, 0 running back. I think it's more likely to get one of your top tier quarterbacks around the 3-4 turn than it is to bank on one of the top tier tight ends to make it to you around the 5-6 turn. So yeah, in terms of having to go with a high end quarterback or a higher end tight end or something, it's just easier to plan on the quarterback. If I end up with a tight end ranked lower than Ferguson, as long as I feel comfortable with my running backs and wide receivers, then I would like to take a shot at one of my sleepers at the end of the draft. Speaking of Noah Fant there, because I got Pat Freiermuth, who could be fine this year, very well might not be. So that's why we took a shot there. Once again, as long I would have been, if I did not like my running backs and my wide receivers for whatever reason, if I didn't feel comfortable with them, I should say, I would have taken another shot at one of those positions over Noah Fant, and just, there's a couple other sleepers that are going to be available too post-draft. So just hopefully worked my magic on the waiver wire if somebody turned out to be much better than Pat Freiermuth available. So there's my 0 RB. Then we're going to look at going hero RB. Just compare these two together against one another, pick a favorite out of them to face up against going with the flow before we see our heavy running back roster hit the market. So from pick 11, hero RB, we got Garrett Wilson, Saquon Barkley, Lamar Jackson, Debo, T. Higgins, George Kittle. The running back room after that, RB2 and backups, Brooks, Elliott, Chase Brown, Dobbins, Gibson, Antonio, and then Calvin Ridley and Xavier Legette to back up those top 3 wide receivers. So we went up and plucked a tight end as well, kind of earlier on with George Kittle getting into the back of that tier that a lot of people are going to be comfortable with. So for the hero RB, I took a risk that pick 12 wasn't about to take both running backs, Williams and Saquon Barkley around that turn. So I banked on one of them making it around the turn. Barkley did make it around, and that's how I got Garrett Wilson and Barkley. So, hero RB, I think usually you think of like first-round running back, but when you're working around the turn, especially, like you can kind of just play the board too. This is the type of situation where I'm happy to see Ezekiel Elliott on the board. So yeah, later on, so I got Barkley, great. Then I have Jonathan Brooks as my RB2, who's I can't rely on for the first several weeks of the season. So that's when you see an Ezekiel Elliott down the board and you say, great. And similar to that, Antonio Gibson is another late round guy that you could be useful early season if you're in a 0 or a hero running back type strategy and you draft other running backs like Jonathan Brooks or Nick Chubb too that you can't rely on early, but you still got him because you like them, you like the value where they were getting at. This is where you can feel comfortable doing that. You can go ahead, you can get in Ezekiel Elliott a little bit later. And if you miss out on that, or if you want to double down on that a little bit, Antonio Gibson, I think, should get a fair amount of receiving work there in New England. We've seen that receiving running back role be very valuable there in the past. And so we also saw that in the preseason. He had a fair amount of targets in a short time period while he was on the field this past weekend. So out of these two rosters, I end up going with the 0 RB roster. I feel just more comfortable with this group of wide receivers. And all in all, I like the running back room a little bit more, despite not quite having that Saquon Barkley upside, which is fantastic, but we made up for that otherwise. And in terms of George Kittle, to me, just a little bit too inconsistent. I suspect this year, if Brandon Ayuk's gone, that probably raises my thoughts on him a little bit, depending on if they get somebody else in return, which is what they want. But for now, time speaking, George Kittle, I'd rather not have that inconsistency. Not that I don't think he's worth drafting there in the 6th, 7th round. Just not something I like on my teams. So to me, that wasn't like some sort of huge loss by missing out on that and having to go Pat Freiermuth. I have faith in Pat and Noah Fant that I've got something between the two that can keep that position afloat at the very least, and maybe a little bit of upside to really have been great values. So that's where I like the 0 RB roster there. Yeah, that advantage at running back, quarterback wasn't quite enough, especially when you consider the depth at the running back position for the 0 RB roster. Between the 0 RB roster and going with the flow, I think we're seeing that going with the flow was basically another hero RB roster. Did I like it more? Nope. We stuck with the 0 RB roster, which makes sense. That was a very similar competition with a little bit better of a running back room, but not as good of a wide receiver room, if I can recall off the top of my head there. George Kittle at the 5th round was, a little bit earlier there. So very close, but 0 RB wins it. And that's going to bring up the final competitor for the 12-team heavy running back roster here, taking 3 running backs in the first 4 rounds, 2 in the around the turn there with Jonathan Taylor and Saquon Barkley. One note that I had about the heavy running back roster in terms of Jaden Daniels there in the 10th round, that if this was a 3 wide receiver league, which we're not necessarily saying that it is, I would have taken a wide receiver there instead of a backup quarterback. So I just wanted to make a point of that because, especially for 3 wide receiver, we're banking on one of those guys coming through for us, and I think there's a really good shot that Rashee Rice will. Chris Godwin should be okay if Rashee Rice doesn't, but I would like a little bit something more, so I'd probably take another shot there at wide receiver in that 10th round pick, with that 10th round pick. Also, later on, Zach Ertz, you'll see I take. You probably never see him getting taken, but I think that he's being overlooked if you really miss out on the tight end position. I think that he could be a great bet to give you a good tight end floor on a week in and week out basis. He is the starting tight end in Washington, and so I think there's some sleeper upside to him and a possible gem that you could just draft with your last pick here. Pair that up with Noah Fant in this heavy running back roster. And seeing that I end up going 2 quarterbacks, I'd rather wait on quarterback as well in this situation. So yeah, in this situation, I probably would, if I were to do this again, instead of taking Joe Burrow there, I'd just go wide receiver a little bit earlier and push off taking the quarterback till a little bit later. Just do 2 quarterback, 2 tight end type of situation. Which one do I like more? It does go to the 0 running back roster a little bit over this heavy running back roster, but it's very close. And I mean, if you're in a non-PPR league, like, just give me the heavy running back roster and let's go for it. But given, especially in full PPR, nods up to the 0 RB. And for half PPR, I think I'll take that a little bit more too. So that was the winner. And I do have just a couple of quick drafts I wanted to show you, picking from pick 10 here, trying to solve my wide receiver woes and running back issues. So here I went wide receiver, running back, wide receiver, running back. We ended up getting Amon St. Brown, DJ Moore, Terry McLaurin, and Brown. And I didn't go with another wide receiver late. I felt comfortable with this in a 2 wide receiver league. And I got a bunch of backup running backs there, a solid quarterback, solid tight end. So I like that, but I think we want to push it just a little bit more with that strong wide receiver to really get what I wanted to see here. So Amon St. Brown, Chris Olave, forcing that wide receiver 2 around that turn. Then we still get James Cook. We still get Pittman as our wide receiver 3, our flex, whatever the case, with Rashee Rice as our our flex or our backup, second backup really, wide receiver here, I'm good. James Conner, Zamir White, James Cook, J.K. Dobbins, and then right there, I'm good. I think I got 4 starting running backs there. Went with my classic Jaden Daniels, Trevor Lawrence combo, a little bit, in the mid-draft there. Jake Ferguson, get him right at the end. I really like this, probably the best out of all the rosters that I drafted by forcing that Chris Olave pick there, which, yep, it feels early, but once again, I think we can make up for that at the running back position, more so than I just don't always love some of the guys I'm seeing here. And then also pushing back the tight end, and here would have been in those 4th, 6th, that area where I said that wide receivers often get taken all the way through the Rashee Rice there in the 7th, 8th round. And then pushing back those tight ends and those quarterbacks to just secure a good group of depth included there for my running backs and wide receivers, which I like. That's going to bring us on to the 10-team leagues, looking first at hero running back versus zero running back. For the zero running back roster, I wrote that it just makes sense to me to be passing over these running backs. So pick 10 there, 0 RB on the right-hand side. Yeah, I just passed over the running backs there, and then got a bunch late. Obviously, Marvin Harrison, Puka Nacua were available. For the 0 RB roster, we still got Ken Walker, Stevenson, Zamir White, Chase Brown, Zach Charbonnet to back up Walker, and J.K. Dobbins as a co-starter there in Los Angeles Chargers. Should be fine as a backup running back as well. Hopefully he doesn't get injured before we ever need him, or hopefully we just never need him. Ladd McConkey, Deontay Johnson as our backup wide receivers. That's nice, especially if we're talking 2 wide receiver. But even if they're backing up a 3 wide receiver group, I think we're going to be able to figure out our flex there. We have obviously a strong quarterback tight end duo too. So a 10-team league. I like this. I'm fine with pushing off everything there. I like that roster. Hero running back. The final pick depended upon 2 or 3 wide receiver, quarterback versus wide receivers. Yeah, so Khalil Shakir there. I could have gone quarterback, or at least one of those final picks even, to pair up with Anthony Richardson. Given his injury history last season, it would be nice to have a backup quarterback, but that just really depended for me on if this was a 2 or 3 wide receiver league, which position I would have gone. I just went quarterback there wide receiver there for no reason. So hero running back versus zero running back roster. Were we able to make up enough here with the running backs? I ended up siding with the hero running back roster over zero. Very, very close. I don't know that I pick the same one every single time, but you see, I end up getting Garrett Wilson around the turn, Nico Collins, Jalen Waddle. The difference might be nothing, whereas Breece Hall over Ken Walker for RB1, definitely really like running backs. Outside of the starting running back, not too different. Quarterback, I don't know that there's much of an advantage for Jalen Hurts over Richardson, but Mark Andrews over Ferguson should be an advantage there. So I could make the argument for the zero running back, but I ended up going with the hero running back, liking that roster just a little bit more. And we're going to compare that to picking with the flow, which I chose for pick 9. Going with the flow, I wrote that the opposite to the 12-team leagues, there were plenty of times where quarterbacks and tight ends were the best available according to ADP. And you kind of saw that with that zero RB roster. And you're just seeing I'm getting the guys that I like more here in 10-team league compared to the other. So that's a thing, 10-team compared to 12. In terms of my rankings, works better from a later position here in 10-team leagues. Also of note, in the 11th round, I made the choice to go wide receiver over running back. So when I went with the flow here, I was just taking basically highest ADP with some minor alterations, but via ADP. So if I would have gotten 10 running backs in the first 10 rounds, obviously I wouldn't take 10 running backs. I would go looking for the next best position of need. So keeping that in mind, this is what I ended up doing. We got Breece Hall, Puka, Travis Kelce, Anthony Richardson there, Isaiah Pacheco, Devonta Smith, and then our backups. Good group of backup wide receivers there. And still even, look at that. You can get J.K. Dobbins right towards the end of the drafts here. Still a strong group of running backs as well. So going with the flow there, nice roster. Definitely a different type of build. I'm I'm okay pushing off the quarterback and the tight end a little bit. One more competitor, heavy running back, getting running backs earlier on here. So I didn't go super heavy, but I did get 2 in the first 3 rounds. Jonathan Taylor, Derrick Henry there. Justin Jefferson fell, so I just kind of felt that I had to, even though I don't actually love Justin Jefferson here this year as much as other years because of quarterback situation, still... I know pretty much anybody would take him there. So that, changed the strategy a little bit. We still get Jonathan Taylor around the turn. Derrick Henry comes to us at the end of the third. That's very nice. It's not a guarantee that can happen, but it is something that 12-team will not happen. 10-team could happen. Then for our second wide receiver, Jalen Waddle, I'm backing those up. Another, nice group here. I still prefer Rashee Rice in general to this group. But both of them got Williams. Yeah. Hopkins just kind of standing out there, and definitely not as good of a wide receiver group, right? Tight end, Trey McBride over Ferguson, clear-cut victory there, but quarterback better for Hero, running back. Running back room, it's pretty darn close. It's really, really close. I end up going Hero RB here over heavy RB. Once again, just liking to get these wide receivers up top, 2nd through 4th round there, compared to some of those later wide receivers, and thinking I'll have to rely upon them. So that should be it. There we go. Thank you very, very much for tuning on in. Take care. Peace out.